When out recently in the forest, I took two cameras with me and I struggled to shoot with the second camera. A new camera to me, and the reason is the format is completely different, the aspect ratio. So what I've done today is I've ditched the main Bronica camera and I've just brought the new camera out to work exclusively with that panoramic format. You see, trying to shoot two completely different aspect ratios at the same time is very difficult, especially when you're not familiar with one of them, having never really shot that aspect ratio before. So I got some pretty decent square format images because that's what I'm used to shooting. I'm quite experienced in that format. But as I said, this new camera completely foxed me, and I thought I can only do it justice by bringing it out on its own to a familiar location and putting an entire roll through it. Now, despite what you see on the camera, there is no light here to shoot. You'd be looking at exposures around about a minute, so we're going to have to think about composition first and then wait for some light to appear. Okay, so the camera is indeed the Hasselblad XPan, which means I'll be working for the next 50 years to pay for it and have no retirement. But it is one of those things I've always wanted, and if I don't do it now, I never will. So here it is in all its expense. So for this first shot, I am taking in these tree trunks here and this slightly curvy tree. Now the crop is sort of like that. It's not exact because it's a rangefinder camera. It's a film is Kodak's Vision 250D, which is a cinematic film, and I'll have to get it sent off to have it processed, or I'll remove the Remjet layer myself. Anyway, 1 second and 2 seconds at f11, focusing on these tree trunks. What I am noticing straight away with this camera is that things that would normally work don't work because you've got far too much detail on the left and right hand side of the frame, and things that you would normally wouldn't be able to shoot because they just haven't got the right aspect ratio look quite good. Now I thought that these grasses, these rushes here would look quite good, and they don't. However, when I looked at this sweeping landscape, I always think square format or 3:2, and it's awful. But in the panoramic crop, it's not bad. I'm not going to waste a frame, but I think I'll just head up a little bit higher and see if I can get some more foreground interest. But it's something that works despite my initial misgivings. Okay, scene number 2. Some lovely young trees growing here. A little bit of frost in the foreground. Now, I've gone for f11 and it's about half a second and a second. I'm taking 2 shots because I am relying on the inbuilt meter of the XPan, and I've never used that meter before, so I don't know how sensitive it is. So I'm going 1 meter to 1+ because it's colour negative film. Rather have an overexposure than an underexposure. I'd like to rely on the meter in future. I don't want to have to rely on a handheld meter because I want to use this thing handheld. And it really is quite a wide sweep, taking in quite a few of these saplings here. So fingers crossed, 2 more frames down. Let's move on to the next one. Now, one of the reasons I've invested in a dedicated panoramic camera is I do like to exclude unnecessary details in my shots. I prefer the long view. Now that might sound strange because panoramics are known for their wide angles. Well, whilst I've only got the standard 45mm lens at the moment, I will have the 90mm in the coming weeks. And what I like particularly is the ability to cut out the sky. I find weak skies are absolutely useless for photography. No sky is better than a weak sky. And this lovely letterbox format makes it so easy to keep a ton of detail in the mid-ground and the foreground whilst having no sky in there if it's no good. And if I want to, of course, and the sky is good, I can always just tilt the camera up. So for me, it's a case of excluding unnecessary detail with these panoramics as opposed to including extra detail. Now the Hasselblad XPan is in reality a medium format camera that takes 35mm film. The reason I say medium format is because the lenses have an image circle which covers a much larger area than any 35mm camera normally would. And the nice thing about that is, because they shoot in a panoramic format, the lens coverage doesn't have to be quite as big as it would if you were shooting like 6x7. That makes the cameras quite small and relatively light. It's about 1 kilo or so, but it means I can walk around with it attached to me a bit easier than any other medium format camera typically would be. Certainly one that shoots such large negatives as this. And I'm finding that very liberating. Oh, hang on a sec, look at those trees over there and a bit of frost. Lovely, 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 and especially lovely in the panoramic format. Not quite sure how much to include of the foreground and the trees because you've only got a sort of narrow band with this lens, but I'm going to shoot it, and I'm going to, yeah, one of the best ones I think. So there's 2 frames, half a second and a second. Again, not too sure about the XPan's metering, and it's quite bright around here. Probably the 1 second one will be better, but I might actually take a couple more frames in this area because, as you can see, it's particularly nice. Well, I've got about 4 frames left. The reason is I took a couple more extras there, but also I did actually take a couple of frames, or 4 frames, on this roll of film on a previous trip into the forest. When I said I hadn't been able to shoot much with it, I actually did take some, but I didn't want to include it on that video because it was just not enough experience, not enough time with the camera. It didn't feel right to start talking about something I know nothing about, so I'm really enjoying this morning, and I just want to get one more scene before I head back for a well-deserved coffee. And one thing I would say, if you are going to go out with a new camera of any sort, whether it be digital or film, I highly recommend shooting somewhere very local to you to get some experience with it, because if you were to go to a dream location with a new camera, chances are you're going to fumble it and lose some good shots, even with a digital one, although far more likely with film. So this is somewhere which is probably about 15 minutes walk from my house, although I did drive here this morning, and I can come back anytime and I can remake any shots I fluff with the camera, so no great loss. Now, spectacular light just coming through now makes the scene entirely different than the one I was shooting only 5 minutes ago. It's just a question now of working out a composition and also some tricky metering. Okay, I've had to put the sun behind these 2 trees here because if I move the sun into the frame, I get flare. You can even see it on the GoPro, and I can't really have that. So I need to be about here, which is tricky because I've got a rangefinder and you have parallax error. So, oh God, this is a steep learning curve. Well, that is pretty much me done for the morning. Apologies for the traffic noise. But as always, I'm retaining 2 frames on this roll of film as I struggle back through the dense undergrowth back to the car in the car park, because you never know. Imagine something amazing opens up for me. I haven't got any more film. I don't want to load another roll. So always keep a couple back if you're shooting film. Digital, no problem, obviously. I just got a feeling I'm going to find something else.
Okay, I'll be honest, I just couldn't resist a vertical panoramic. It's something you have to do when you have one of these cameras, and I do think the composition is very nice. However, I missed focus. Oh, I missed focus. I placed it on the tree behind, as you can see here, so not my finest hour, but very nice colours though. Lovely colours from that Vision 3 film. Anyway, how did I find shooting with the XPan? Well, I found it very enjoyable. I found it very challenging, as I said, and I found out a few things I didn't realize were going to affect the images as much as they did. The first one is vignetting. Now, with that 45mm lens, there is quite a considerable vignette. The center is a good stop or so brighter than the outsides. Now, I didn't think that would show up on color negative film, maybe on slide film, but it actually did. And I had to bring in a vignette onto the outside to lighten them up. Now, I will probably build a profile or a preset in Lightroom to compensate for that. The reason being, the filter for the Hasselblad is around about £400, and that's an awful lot of money for a little piece of glass. So I won't be buying that anytime soon. Secondly, it was the ease, I think, of composing within the viewfinder of the camera itself. It was better than I thought. Now, it's a rangefinder, so you have a much clearer vision than if you're looking through a lens on an SLR. Although I use my preview application on the iPhone, the Mark II Artist Viewfinder, I did find it quite easy to compose in camera. Now, as I said on the video, the thing I found most enjoyable about shooting this format is what I could exclude, not what I could include, even though it was a very wide lens. I found being able to cut out the sky and too much foreground greatly benefited my compositions, particularly those last two in the woods. If I'd have shot with a more conventional aspect ratio, I'd have had too much sky or too much foreground. And this also makes focusing a lot easier because obviously you haven't got as much near focus issue with this sort of camera as you would with, say, a square format camera, because the things you're focusing on are typically a little bit further away and you haven't got the sky, as I say, intruding and dragging your eye out. So I found that particularly nice. And I do have the 90mm lens now, and I've shot a few frames with it, and that's even better in this respect. So all in all, I enjoyed the outing, although the images weren't very good. I mean, they might look okay in the video, but I could have done a lot better. I would have got better images had I been shooting with a camera I was more familiar with, but this was very much a learning exercise, a bit of a recce. So I'll definitely be out shooting more with it pretty soon. In fact, I've been out with it once since, briefly with black and white film. And I'm sure it's going to get a lot of use this year, although it will be pampered because it's, as I said, rather expensive and it's not going to get wet or damp or knocked about. It's going to be treated with due care and respect. So I do hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the change of aspect ratio and format. And I'll see you again on the next one.